Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm glad to be able to come and be with you this afternoon, this evening, whatever it is. Or maybe even it's in this morning, depending on when you're receiving this. Hey, I'm Doug Wilkerson with Saturday Night Live and Central Christian Center here in Joplin. Encouraging word from Doug. And my encouraging word from Doug today may sound a little discouraging, but hang on for a second. And this has really been on my heart all week, and I have wrestled with it. And so, anyway, here's my title, Setting with God and My Anxious Thoughts. What do you think about that? Setting with God and My Anxious Thoughts. I want to start off with Psalms 139:23 and verse 24, and it goes like this. It says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts." I'm going to pause right there for a second. This is King David calling out, asking God to search him, and oftentimes we do that. Although sometimes we're not real sure if we want him to do that or not, but hang with me here because we're in a stressful time right now. Today has been a stressful day. Getting this together and some things that's going on today, I really have reflected on what I'm going to share here tonight because I needed it, and I was practicing it, and we'll talk more about that later, hopefully. But oh God, know my heart. God knows our heart, whether we give him permission or not. But if we were to give him permission, I think we open our heart gates open a little more because we are normally run pretty much closed up because we're in a defensive or protective mode. We wear a certain amount of armor all the time, shielding ourselves, protecting ourselves from everything around us. And the sad part, even from God. So here we are, we say, God, you know my thoughts. Search me. Then it goes on and says, test me and know my anxious thoughts. That statement right there has been going over and over in my head and in my heart all week. Know my anxious thoughts. Normally what we do with anxious thoughts is well, what do you think you do? What do you do with your anxious thoughts? Before I tell you, what do you do? Yeah, probably the way most of us, sometimes I do it. I try not to do it, but here we are. And that is that we deny our anxious thoughts. We suppress our anxious thoughts. We avoid our anxious thoughts. We can even lie to ourselves about our anxious thoughts. We could do that because we're trying to suppress it and be what we think we're supposed to be. And that's not all bad, but hang on with me. Or we do the extreme and we just wallow in our anxious thoughts. We blow up our anxious thoughts. We exaggerate our anxious thoughts. We just let our anxious thoughts come in and overwhelm us and say, it's not my fault. It's that. It's coronavirus. It's the government. It's my wife. It's my kids. It's my job. It's the lack of job. It's the lack of money. It's this or that. We're blaming something for our anxious thoughts. And as long as we're not involved with our anxious thoughts and blaming something else, we're actually not taking responsibility for our own emotions and dealing with them. And here, this just struck me as a way that King David was entering into God's presence and saying, God, you know my anxious thoughts. Come and sit with me and help me with my anxious thoughts. I'm not for sure what's going on. I need your help. Help me, please. And you're not denying them, and you're not exaggerating them. You're just being there. You're noticing them. Actually, they call it mindfulness. You're just being mindful of what's going on, these things that are swirling around inside your head and in your heart and in your gut. And so, God, help me. Help me. And what do you think? Do you think if you invited God into your anxious thoughts that it might have some sort of effect? I believe it would. I believe it would. In fact, He might even bring some clarity. He may help you to recognize these thoughts that you're having that's anxious. Maybe some of them are rational, that they're actually troublesome. And how am I going to deal with these situations? Well, we take it one step at a time. I remember when my dad was sick and had surgery at the hospital. It's been about 20 years ago now. Didn't feel like it. But they came out and said, well, we only give him, I think they gave him like 90 days to live or something like that. And people were asking me, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I remember every phone call that came in, every person, they all continually asking me, and I just decided that what I was going to say is, I don't know what I'm going to do. We're just going to deal with it one step at a time. We'll deal with what's in front of us at the time. And I'm not sure how I was able to come up with that, but I knew that we had to do something to process, and that we're just going to deal with it. So all the stuff that's happening in our life today, there is no sense in letting it push you over the emotional edge, and then just blowing up, and then letting the explosion actually then take demand over your life and dictate how you're going to respond from there. I think it's really in our best interest to allow God to come into our anxiousness and help us through that. Let's read the rest of this portion. Verse 24, it says, point out anything in me that offends you. Boy, that's a pretty big statement. We say that right after my anxious thoughts. Well, maybe I'm a little distorted, or maybe I'm blaming, or maybe I'm shifting responsibility, or blame shifting, or maybe it is a tough situation. Maybe I don't know, because I've been in times where I said, God, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to totally trust you. And my next thought was, well, who was I trusting before I said that? Well, sometimes it's just we're trusting ourselves. Yeah, I was trusting God some, but maybe mostly ourselves. In my case, that was my case. And so he goes on and says, point out anything in me that offends you, and lead me along the path of everlasting life. And if you just really soak into that last half of that 24th verse, you can just say, all right, He's leading me. I'm going to trust Him. When you hire a guide to guide you someplace, or even if you just use GPS, you trust it to get you where you're going. I don't have to know, because it's supposed to know, and it helps me get there. And I can let go of my anxiousness of knowing the terms and just letting things process. And if I can trust in God, if I can rely on Him, which is what Apostle Paul said in 2 Corinthians, the first chapter, that the things that happen to him all happen to him to help him to come to the place of not trusting in Him, but totally rely on God. And so today I just want to say that we're human, and part of maturing as humans, as Christians, as believers, as adults, that we have to deal with difficulties, things that are challenging, anxiety. And what we do is we we have to deal with them by stepping into them. And one of the best ways to step into it is invite God to come and sit with you when you're in the middle of it. And allow him to calm you mentally, emotionally, physically. And let that peace come there. And when you do that, you're better connected spiritually. And if you're better connected spiritually, then you can hear what he's saying to you. Instead of all the craziness going on in your head and whirling around and tossing you back and forth, causing you want to panic, you can just calm down. Go ahead and sit down and invite God to sit with you in your anxiety, those anxious thoughts. Allow him to work through them with you. And I believe he will. He's done that with me today. And I hope he does that with you today too. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and may his face shine upon you and give you his peace. And I want you to have a good day, good night, a good life. I'll see you later.